This video is all about the dangers of buying new construction in Vancouver. Whether you're moving here from somewhere else or you're already here, but you're thinking of buying new construction, this video is made just for you because many people think that buying new construction is kind of a fail-safe way of printing money. The truth is, yes, you can make significant money, build equity by buying new construction, but there are significant dangers, a lot of risks that you're taking on that most people are completely unaware of. I have 10 dangers of buying new construction in Vancouver here for you right now. You're gonna wanna watch this video all the way to the end because every single one of these is critical for you to understand. Let's get into it right now. My name is Sebastian Albrecht with the Living in Vancouver, BC team. And if you're new to the channel, this video is all about living in and moving to Vancouver. If you're not new, welcome back. I'm always happy to see returning viewers back on the channel, liking, commenting, and subscribing. This video, we're talking about the dangers of purchasing new construction in Vancouver, and danger number one is uncertain timelines. So when you're purchasing new construction, you're buying before the property is actually built typically. And in those contracts, there's sort of a moving timeline as to when the property is gonna close. When you're buying a resale property, you have a definitive time. It is January 22nd, 2025. When you're purchasing new construction, that time may shift because it depends really how far along construction is, how precise they can be. Many factors are actually completely outside of the builder's control. Like what if there's some issue around getting certain types of building products, like the toilets that they ordered don't come in time, or the roofing because of the weather has to be delayed. But predominantly, the biggest thing that's out of their control is when they're gonna get occupancy, and they can't transfer the ownership from them to you until occupancy has been granted by whatever city, whatever municipality the home is in. So whether that's in the city of Vancouver, the city of Surrey, or the city of North Vancouver, wherever you're looking in Metro Vancouver, this is a risk. And so as a buyer of new construction, you sort of have to have that knowledge in the back of your mind, and you have to have a backup plan. What that means is you may need to move more than once. And if you have a property to sell or you've moved here from somewhere else and your job starts on June 1st and you're expecting to close May 31st, well, if they can't give you occupancy, there's nothing that can be done about that. You know, maybe they give you occupancy a month later, 2 months, 3 months. I mean, to be quite honest, it's very unusual that construction is exactly on time, and it's never early, it's always late. So you definitely sort of want to anticipate that there's going to be some kind of delay. And so that might mean that you need some sort of short-term rental in between. You might also need to be arranging some kind of storage for your belongings in between. And then the other big issue for people is that it might prevent you from being able to register your children in the school that you want them to get into, depending on your time, depending on whether you have kids or not. But I've faced this issue with clients of mine, and I had some clients not so long ago that moved here from Seattle, and they had purchased a new home in Seattle. Their experience in Seattle was that when they purchased a brand new home, there was a definitive time they could expect occupancy. They were shocked when I explained to them that in Vancouver, that does not happen. And for them in particular, it meant they were moving here so their child could be in a school. Their child had to have a permanent residence address to be able to give to the school to be able to get them into that school, even though they had a spot, you know, saved. And so it was very constraining in the types of properties we could look at. They wanted new construction, but basically it meant that occupancy had to be granted. And that's kind of an unusual thing. It meant that the potential pool of properties we were looking at was very, very small. So be aware when you're looking at new construction, uncertain timelines, that closing date can be a moving target, and we have to take that into account. Danger number two would be the marketing. Developers spend a lot of money selling their product, and they're making it look beautiful, amazing. They're putting it in its best light. The descriptions, the photos, the videos, and then you're going into show home. There's little tricks that are made in show homes in particular that kind of present the product in a different way. So as an example, you may not know what the ceiling height is in the condo that you're going to be purchasing, but the ceiling heights in the show home are 20 feet high because it's in some sort of massive trailer or in a warehouse of some kind. And so they can set it up so that it feels much more spacious than it actually is. So ceiling heights are something to pay attention to, and you definitely want to ask, what is the ceiling height? If the finished product is gonna have 8-foot ceilings and then you're in a space in the show home that has 12-foot ceilings, you need to be aware that's gonna feel very, very different. The other thing is that they are perfectly designed. They've had interior designers come in, select the most modern colors, the most modern furniture. It's presented in a way that's made to be sold, and you're gonna fall in love with that. The reality of the way that you're gonna live in this space, obviously, when you purchase the property, you're not buying all of that. You're just getting the box, essentially. And so it may not feel as amazing as that show home does. The other thing is that occasionally, or not all too unoften, the show homes are presented with upgrade packages. And so those upgrade packages are gonna cost extra money. That's not necessarily the bare bones of what you're buying. And so you need to be aware of that too. The second big thing is when you see a floor plan from a developer, keep in mind, they will not show you on that floor plan the room dimensions. So they're gonna show you a bedroom and they're gonna show you a bed in that bedroom, but they're not gonna say this room is actually, there's a bed in there, but it's 8 by 8.5 feet. Well, the reality of a bedroom that size is that bed that they're showing that has 2 little pillows on it is really a single bed. And that's basically all that's gonna fit in there. And your dreams of a king size bed are not gonna work out. And that's something I find that a lot of people kind of get misled by. And so they may be telling you the total square feet, but what they're not gonna be sharing is exactly what those room dimensions are. And those are questions that you might want to ask the developer when you're looking at purchasing. Danger number 3 is not being aware of the hidden costs. So often a developer will there will be a loss leader. You know, we know this about retail sales in general. They do the same type of thing with new construction properties as well. So they'll advertise, you know, 1 bedroom starting at $599 or something like that. Now, there's one bedroom, and that's probably the one that's backing onto the alley right above the garbage, or the on-ramp, or the ramp into the underground parkade, that type of thing. Everything else is significantly more expensive. It goes from $599, the next one's $699. But aside from that, what they also tend to do is that parking and storage may be charged separately. There's no real bargain when it comes to those prices. So they may have lower prices on the homes themselves, but then they might be charging you extra for those add-ons that you may think are kind of standard. And so the parking stall might be an extra $70,000. The storage locker might be an extra $20,000. One thing while we're talking about these extras that you may want to keep in mind is you might want to look into that possibility. If there is an extra parking stall that you can purchase, this might be the opportune time to do that, because it makes living in the property a lot easier. You don't have to worry about the second car that you and your family might need or have already. Where are you going to park it outside, and how secure is it going to be? So having that second parking stall can be a real asset when you're living in the property, but it also is an enormous asset when it comes time to sell the property down the road. Same thing with storage. So those are things, if they're within your budget, those are worth looking into if they're available. And then the other thing to be aware of, that's the additional cost that's different from resale properties, is that there is GST. There is tax on new construction properties. You need to be aware of that. We're going to get into that in the next point. Danger number 4 are taxes. Nobody likes taxes, me least of all. But if you're looking at purchasing new construction, there is a tax that's unique to new construction that you don't see on resale properties, and that is GST. And you have to pay that GST at closing. It's 5% of the purchase cost. Occasionally, I'm going to say very occasionally, you can have that included or sort of shared with the developer. In bigger projects, in stronger markets, this is much, much less likely. But when a developer is looking to sort of move product, they're feeling a little bit of desperation to try and get some sales happening, they may be willing to swallow all or part of that GST. So it is paid at closing, and it, most importantly, is not part of the advertised price. So you don't want to be surprised by this. This is the risk for you, is that you don't work the taxes into your budget, and you definitely need to do that. And be aware that GST is always payable on new construction. Somebody's got to pay for it, whether it's the developer or the purchaser. If you're enjoying this video, definitely hit that like button and smash subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one about moving to and living in Vancouver. I put up videos just like this every single week. And don't forget to comment down below if you have any experience buying new construction, write down below some of your horror stories or success stories. I'd love to hear them. I'll get back to every single one of you. Now let's get back to the video. Danger number 5 is another timeline. It's lengthy timelines. And this varies depending on the kind of product that you're looking at purchasing in Vancouver. Whether it's a house, a townhouse, or a condo, they all kind of have different times at which the property typically sells. Now, the longest timeline tends to be for condominiums. They have very regularly, they get sold at a pre-sale that happens before ground is even broken. So the developer has the piece of land, they're trying to get the financing to start the project, but the bank wants to see that they're able to sell the condos. And so they need to do it well ahead of time. That's where you as the buyer need to use your imagination. You have nothing to view, you have nothing to see other than a pamphlet, other than some renderings that the developer may have made and a showroom perhaps, but there's no tangible physical presence of the building already built. And in that case, the timeline could be 2-3 years out before they're hoping that you're going to be able to take possession of that property. Now, there are some horror stories in Vancouver's past where, that timeline has just been pushed back further and further. And some projects have been in the 4 to 5 year range between, when you commit to purchasing and when you actually get to take possession, because the length of construction just took a lot longer than expected. So the longest timelines tend to be for new construction of condos. Townhouses are somewhere in between. So they tend to be smaller projects. A townhouse complex could be 5 units, it could be 10, it could be 30. But typically those get built much more quickly. There's not as much red tape involved in building them. And not always will they be sold at a pre-sale. So they may start selling them only when they're halfway completed. It really depends on how deep the pockets are of the developer. You can imagine from the developer's perspective, it doesn't cost as much money for them. They don't need as big a piece of a land. They're not building as many homes. So many developers sort of have the bankroll to be able to push that project further before they need to sell those properties. And so, you may be only 6 months out of completion or 2 months out if it's a townhouse project, but still likely they're sold pre-sale, they're sold before construction completes. Now the third type would be typically houses or half duplexes. On those, the timeline tends to be very, very brief. Most commonly, those are small developers building sort of one-off projects here and there, and they typically finish those projects before they get sold. Mainly that's, again, because of the way that they're funding the project, but it's also because they can command a higher price once it's completed. They're not as good as big developers on doing the marketing, and so it's not quite as slick. They want the product finished. They want you to go inside. They can't sell that home and have a showroom for you to go and have a look. That would cut too far into their pretty tight profit margins. The result is, if you're looking at buying a house or a half duplex, you're able to actually walk into that and see it and then close on it relatively quickly. And in fact, most developers are going to want you to close quite quickly on those types of projects because it costs them a lot of money to hold it, to keep it vacant. And that is generally their preference. But the one thing you need to make sure is that they have vacant occupancy. If they do not have vacant occupancy, you can't take possession. So that's the one little snafu, the fly in the ointment, is if they don't have that vacant possession, you can't close as quickly as you and they may want. And if you are thinking of purchasing new construction in Vancouver or purchasing any kind of property, don't forget that I am a real estate agent that has helped hundreds of people settle in Vancouver, and I can help you and your family find the right home as well. Reach out anytime. My contact information is right here on the screen. We can get that ball rolling and figure out where is best for you and your family. Now let's get back to the video. All right, so danger number 6 is that you don't always get what you think you're getting. That is a risk that you're taking on when you purchase new construction. And there are consumer protections in place when you're purchasing new construction, but there's still a bit of leeway as to what the developer says they're going to provide to you and then what they actually deliver, whether it's 2 months down the road or 2 years down the road. So one example of this would be the square footage. And if they're saying that the home is going to be 1,000 square feet, they can legally provide you anything between 1,000 square feet and 970 square feet. So it just has to be within 3%. There's a margin of error of 3% where they don't have to compensate you in any way. There is formula typically in the developer's contracts about how they will compensate you if there's any less than that. They say that the 1 bedroom is going to be 502 square feet. Well, there are sort of these barriers that people aren't willing to look under. So I would say for a 1-bedroom in Vancouver, that's about 500 square feet. For a 2-bedroom, it's typically about 800 square feet. Even though they are providing you what they said they're going to, and they're within this margin of error, if it's 800 square feet and they deliver you 785, let's say, it's within that 3% margin of error, but you've fallen below the 800 square foot sort of bare minimum that most buyers are looking for when it comes to a 2-bedroom. It makes that home a lot more difficult to sell down the road. There's also cases where, you know, they are providing even less square footage, like it's 950 square feet instead of 1,000. And who's actually going in and measuring? Very few people actually do that. And if the developer doesn't bring it to your attention, they don't have to compensate you. So that is another risk that you're taking on and you want to be aware of. They can also move windows or walls. You may think that there's a den in a corner and it's not there. I can think of a building in Vancouver where all the 2 bedrooms have 2 bedrooms plus a den, and there's one floor plan that does not have a den. This building is about 12 years old now, and that one floor plan has always been difficult to sell as a result. Those buyers that purchased pre-sale didn't get any kind of compensation for that, but it did affect the value of what they purchased. And one more example would be, you know, they might say that there's going to be a rooftop pool, but at the end of the day, they actually put it down on the ground floor. Maybe they realized that was just going to be too expensive. That is not something that they need to compensate you in any way for, and you just need to live with it. So you need to realize that the promises that are being made to you as a consumer may be a little bit pie in the sky, and what you get delivered may not be exactly what you're expecting. Something else you need to be aware of is that you do need to use a developer's contract when you're purchasing new construction. Now, not every single new construction home, but the vast majority. Big developers all use their own developer's contract. They hire a lawyer to help them formulate a contract, and the lawyer's job is to protect the developer, not the purchaser. So those contracts are basically very one-sided. As opposed to what you'd be using if a home is listed on the MLS, it's typically a resale home in that case. Those properties are using MLS contracts. So if you had a real estate agent that was helping you purchase a home that was listed on the MLS and it's resale, you're using an MLS contract that was designed by a real estate board's lawyer to protect both parties to the contract, both the buyer and the seller. It's very fair, very balanced, unlike a developer's contract. And that is a huge risk, a huge danger when it comes to purchasing new construction in Vancouver. No developer that has a developer's contract is going to be willing to sell to you unless you're willing to sign one of their contracts. However, you do need to keep in mind that there is something called the right of rescission in BC. And that means that you have 7 days to decide whether or not you're going to go through with the purchase. For any reason, at the end of those 7 days, if you wake up and you just had a bad sleep, or you decided you didn't like the paint color, or what I'm suggesting here, you take your contract to your lawyer and have them review that contract and then help you interpret that contract. That's something you can do. And if there's something in there that you and your lawyer are uncomfortable with, you can decide not to go forward with the purchase. That is well within your rights, but it is something that you definitely need to be aware of when you're looking at purchasing new construction in Vancouver. Danger number 8 would be not being able to get financing. So the thing is, most of the time, if you recall, the timeline is quite extended when it comes to purchasing new construction. You sign a contract today, committing yourself to the purchase, but you may not close on that property until it's finished construction, obviously, which might be 2-3 years in the future. The result is that's an immense amount of time. Most banks are not willing to guarantee you funds that far in the future. Most rate holds are for 90 days and sometimes for 120 days at the outside, but that's a lot less time than you're gonna need to close on new construction. So what happens in between today and 2 or 3 years from now is a lot. Life happens. You might have triplets. I myself had twins. You might get divorced. You might get married. You might lose a job. You might be unable to work. You might find that interest rates suddenly go up. And as a result, the legal commitment you made today, you might not be able to fulfill in the future. And that is a risk. That is an immense danger that a lot of people do not take into account. They just assume everything is going to be fine. But the reality is a lot of people's life circumstances change over the course of 1, 2, or 3 years. And you definitely want to be aware of that when you're thinking of buying new construction. Danger number 9 is not working with a realtor. A lot of people think that you don't need a real estate agent when it comes to purchasing new construction. And the truth is, you don't. You can walk into a developer show home and they'd be more than happy to sell you a property. And the reason they'd be more than willing to help you do that is that they get more profit when you do. They have a budget in mind. They're going to pay their own salesperson who's working at that show home, but they also have a budget for a real estate agent that's working with you. If you are not working with a real estate agent, they're just going to keep that profit. They're not going to give you that money. They're going to keep it for themselves. So it's in your best interest to have somebody that is working for you, that is looking after your best interest, because little do you know that the salesperson that is incredibly friendly in that show home is not working in your best interest. They are trying to keep as much profit as they possibly can for the developer. You having somebody on your side is going to be able to make sure that you're purchasing the best possible home, the best floor plan, at the best possible price, and negotiate for you, not just the price perhaps, but also potentially the inclusion of GST or an extra parking stall or an extra storage locker. They're going to understand what's possible in the current market dynamic. So there's no risk to you in having a real estate agent, but there's enormous risks to you if you do not. I highly recommend working with an experienced real estate agent in new construction. And number 10 would be not having an inspection. A lot of people think buying a new home is basically a slam dunk, that there's nothing for you to worry about. And mainly that's because they know that there's a 2-5-10 warranty. And yes, that does exist. And yes, the developer is likely to do a walkthrough with you as the new owner, as the first owner. And they do want to keep you happy. So anything that you point out, they're more than likely just to take care of. Little scratches and dents, some paint missing here and there. Little things are usually what you find. They are going to take care of all of that. But what about all the things that you don't know should be there, but that actually aren't? Things that they miss and that you miss in your walkthrough because you're not a professional inspector. That's why you want a professional inspector to be there. They know what all the building codes are. They know what the developer should be doing. They know what people are typically missing through these walkthroughs, and they're gonna find every single little thing that they possibly could. And then you can take that information and bring it to the developer and they will fix that stuff as well. That is the biggest reason that I'd suggest you'd want to have an inspector there. But there are some horror stories as well as what is possible. And so often the inspector is the only person that is able to find that. I just had an inspection done yesterday on a new home for a client. The inspector told me that he had done 4 new home inspections in the last week. 2 of those inspections he did not pass. My clients were under the impression, you know, we don't really need to be doing an inspection here, but let's just do one for the sake of it and make sure we're crossing the T's, dotting the I's. They were shocked to learn he didn't pass 2 other properties that week. Ours, luckily, was one of 2 that he did pass and that he thought was done really, really well. But there were 2 that he said they cut a lot of corners and there was a lot of issues that are gonna sort of cause problems down the road. And he would avoid buying those. So that's something that you do wanna be aware of. Yes, there are building codes. Yes, there are inspections by the cities, but there are things that get slipped past. And having somebody on your side that is a professional inspector will help you catch those things and can help you make a massive, very costly mistake. So do hire an inspector when you're closing on a new construction home. All right, wow, there's a lot packed into this video. I hope you got some value out of it. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope this is gonna help you buy a new construction home in Vancouver. If you are thinking of purchasing in Vancouver, be sure to reach out anytime. My contact information is right here on the screen. I'm happy to have a conversation with you and see if we're a good fit and see if I can help you find the right home for you and your family. And if you got value out of this video, be sure to hit the like button, smash the subscribe button if you want to see more videos just like this one about living in and moving to Vancouver. In the meantime, don't forget to check out all of my dozens of other videos on all sorts of topics all about living in and moving to Vancouver. But 2, I'd love to have you check out and meet you on. This one over here is a more in-depth look at new construction. And then this playlist of videos over here is all about some of the best neighborhoods in Metro Vancouver to move to. So check out both of those and I'll see you on next week's video.